We know that if you're looking at young children, the family environment is important. It's an important variable, whether we're talking about education, developing self-confidence, self-efficacy. The family environment, however defined, is important. And in this case, building that, the eating behaviors we know develop early in life, right? And parents or guardians are principal agents, as indicated in that summary report by the Institute of Medicine. And how do parents influence their children's behaviors? Through a variety of different ways, like role modeling, right, and by providing options. That was the overall summary of the Institute of Medicine report on this. You know, they're the gatekeepers. What foods are you going to have in the house? Okay, you have a choice, but among these 5 choices, most of them are healthy in some way. Yes, physical activity is going to be an important part of this family lifestyle, but choose what type. And then, how many of you that are thinking about an idea have a framework, a conceptual framework or a model in mind? Okay. Most research and cross-discipline, and certainly in social and behavioral sciences, even in policy, in nursing, in health sciences, and other areas have to have some kind of conceptual organizing framework. So this study used a theoretical framework. Psychologists in the audience would likely know actually Grothenbrenner was the one that first defined it, and then this ecological systems theory was expanded and added to by a variety of by individuals from different disciplines. But she focused her or framed her work in this, and in this particular conceptualization, we know that the development of childhood obesity is dependent upon multiple systems factors operating on multiple levels, because it's a systems perspective. Okay, and we're looking at the interaction of the child with the environment, and the most proximal one for young children, the family environment, and then the school. And so you may not really be able to see this really clearly, but this is her framework, adapted from, again, it was Grothenbrenner, and then later elaborated by the Institute of Medicine as their framework for looking at childhood obesity, and many other groups, including the Society of Behavioral Medicine. Okay, so we see that background piece. So we enter parenting style. How do we argue for those connects? Every piece. That's why when I work with students and young faculty, we get that idea down, get that research question down, get that problem statement down, because it guides the rest of your research. And those major variables or the major constructs in that question are going to guide the review of literature, the methods, etc. So she's looking at parenting style and child weight status. So what is parenting style? It's really a characteristic of parents. And it's been defined by developmental psychologists as an emotional climate or context for parent-child interactions. And it has been observed to be a moderator between parental practices and child outcomes, a range of psychological outcomes. And in fact, Diana Baumerind, who did seminal work in this area, looked at, and I studied in my PhD program, which is an interdisciplinary program, in human development, interdisciplinary studies in human development. Baumerind elaborated 3 styles: authoritative, authoritarian, and permissive. And it was shown that the authoritative parenting style across different areas influenced particularly different measures of child competence. So it's been a characteristic, a parenting characteristic that's held up over time and across certain childhood competencies. But there was minimal information was available on parenting style and child weight. So she's trying to link that in to capture some aspect that would be workable, feasible, logical, and add to the literature in the area. So parenting style and child weight. And so here's the major purpose, and then this could be more specific, so you can tell me. So the major purpose, this is proposed before it was done, of this cross-sectional descriptive study of ethnically diverse families is to examine the relationship between parenting style and child weight. So what this tells you, something about the design, it's cross-sectional, not longitudinal, it's descriptive. right? It's not experimental. They're ethnically diverse. That would have to be operationally defined. What do we mean? And they're examining relationships, which also says it's descriptive and correlational likely, between parenting style and child weight. Now we're going to go on to the aims and the questions. But what variables would need to be operationally defined and expanded in the literature too in this question? Age. Right, there could be some in this statement without making it too cumbersome about what are the age of the children. That's a very good point. What else?
Parenting style.
Pardon?
Parenting style and child weight.
Yeah, they're two, right, exactly, two big variables. So sometimes you can put the purpose statement and then define both theoretically how it links with your conceptual framework as well as the empirical definitions, how you're going to capture that and measure it. Parenting style and child weight. So let's look a little more specifically here. So here were the aims, aim and a research question. So usually we encourage, major purpose statement, depending upon how much room you have, and you do have a little more latitude in your dissertations than you have, for example, in a grant application where, you have to be, every word counts. So her aim was to describe the relationship between parenting style and child weight in ethnically diverse families. And question 1 was, in those families, is there a relationship? So it's described and then it's raised as a question. Aim 1. Aim 2, explore the influence of parent BMI, surrogate measure of weight status. Socioeconomic status, always a variable, even when ethnicity is examined. And ethnicity on the relationship between parenting style and child weight. These were young children. And then finally is the relationship, you could probably tell by the picture, between parenting style and child weight influenced by parent BMI, SES, and it should be and/or ethnicity. So, you see we have a purpose and then we have aims. And then we can take each of those and define them. But you get a handle on where we're going with that, right, and how she built it. Now, I also included one. This was our Excel study that you saw a picture of, and that we recently completed. Must be published. Sleepless nights? Not really. So, what? So, read this purpose statement, and what do you learn from this? The purpose of this randomized controlled pilot study was to evaluate feasibility, acceptability, and short-term impact of a supervised physical activity after-school program that incorporate excerpt gaming for elementary students. And here, this is how we put it in the proposal, because we did get some funding for this from the Harvard Catalyst, actually. Primary outcome was change in moderate to MVPA, moderate to vigorous physical activity, and the secondary outcomes, change in anthropometrics and risk factors for cardiometabolic disease. So what do you learn, or do you see the strengths of that purpose statement, and what do you see as the limitations? What do you take away from that?
I just had one
Sure.
thought, which is that the outcomes, like they match the short term,
Right.
which is good, but I didn't see anything about feasibility and acceptability in terms of the outcomes.
Right, right, which could be stated, which we had to do. Very good point. She said she sees primary and secondary, but she doesn't see anything about feasibility, acceptability. And it's not uncommon that we do now that that's like to see it's a foundational study or a pilot study. So you have to say, use the metrics that you're using to capture feasibility. Is it feasible? Did 70% of the individuals who were targeted, did they enroll, did they complete the study? What were the measures of acceptability, which we did include for children, parents, school, because it was a partnership. So we got all of those assessments from the children, from the teachers, the primary family coordinator in that school, and the school administrators. But yes, you should also have that in there. What else does it tell you? it's a pilot study, but it's a randomized trial, which means that what? That there were inclusion and exclusion criteria that the target population met, and then they were randomly assigned to an intervention and or control group.
What was the sample size for this pilot study?
Pardon?
The sample size.
What was the final sample size? You would ask. I have that, all of those in another set of slides, which we didn't go into. I think I have to get back to you on what the final one was as a researcher. We did have some attrition along the way, but I'll be happy to share that with you. Particularly after it's published, but we did present this at American Academy of Pediatrics, which brought them then here to Go Kids to see the exergaming.
How long was it? This is a longitudinal study.
Pardon?
This is a longitudinal study, right?
No, it wasn't longitudinal. It was a randomized control trial that extended over 2 years, but we didn't follow the children. We did an assessment. The children met as you do, I'll just explain that when, in any RCT, you have criteria, individuals who meet the criteria, then you determine get their consent, they're randomized to the groups, and they were blinded to what group they were in. Then we did total assessments of a variety of factors, including, physical activity. They did the accelerometer for 7 days. We did a number of anthropometrics like height, weight, skin folds, etc. We also got blood samples. So we did that at baseline. And then they came here. It was 3 times a week. We bused them here from a school in Dorchester. They came here for 3 times a week, an hour at each time. The total trip, but 30 minutes, and they participated in a variety of activities, which also included exergaming, the technology-mediated physical activity. And then at the end of that 10-week period, we measured them, so, pre-post, both in and there were between and within group differences, but not in MVPA, but in sedentary activities, sedentary time, which is good, and in light physical activity.
I'm sorry, what is MVPA?
I'm so sorry. Moderate to vigorous physical activity, like aerobic exercise.
Okay.
Right. But the important point here is that if you can get in that purpose statement, we got that it was a pilot, that it was a randomized trial, and it's short-term told you that it wasn't going to be like our 5-year study now where we're actually measuring outcomes up to 18 months, right? And then we're saying also, you notice that, and that's what it was powered on, is the change in that from pre to post, change in those from pre to post, of which there were between and within group differences in that. So I will tell you the exact number of fun, but that's an example of a pilot study. Then another example, and tell me the purpose of this. This was an F-31 supported, dissertation, and the purpose of this cross-sectional study was to examine the relationship of family cohesion, family adaptability, and time post-death to parental bereavement reactions after a death of a child. So what do you note here? Something about the design, right? And what are the major variables here that you would meet, who would guide your literature review, and that you would have to capture and measure? Right. Time.
Death.
Right. Time post-death. I've heard family cohesion, family adaptability, which were, and that was part of a tool with psychometric properties, and time post-death, and then what else?
You have to study parental bereavement in and of itself.
The reaction itself.
What are to the reactions. Right. And so, and this is a good point to raise too, when you think about a question and where you're going with it, when I work with individuals who are developing grants, you think about, okay, this is it now, but what is that going to lead to? Particularly if it's a pilot study. So we learn this, how is this going to guide and inform the next step? And so